So this afternoon, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the company that I work with and our story on the how we got to where we're at with Microsoft Teams at this point. I did talk a little bit, if you guys met my session this morning, I did talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing that we'll cover here as well, but this is really focused on that deployment story with Microsoft Teams. So a little bit about myself, Office 365 Enterprise Collaboration Manager. I'm the technical product manager for Office 365 at Mednax. My team consists of, and we'll actually talk about that, so I'll get to that. And I remember I actually have that slide in here. Husband, 21 years, father, have a college kid and a high school kid, both going through the COVID. They're in class, they're not in class, so all that stuff is happening right now. And that's my Twitter, and then that's my email if you need to reach out to me for anything. So some of the things that I'm talking about is really what we talked about and what we did from a governance principles, considerations, planning, technical guidance, and how do we manage and maintain as we were doing this particular project of getting Microsoft Teams out and running in our organization. But first about Mednax. Mednax is a healthcare services company. So we don't own the hospitals, but we help put the nurses, the clinicians, some of the actual machines to be able to do some of the things that they need to do and help hospitals with those things. So we have the expertise on neonatal and we have the expertise on those types of things. So that's what we're, and all of a sudden I stopped displaying. Hang on, guys. Sorry about that. I hit a button and then everything went off. Really, it's a service provider, kind of like a lot of our IT service providers that are out there. This is all healthcare. Right now, the company is really focusing on neonatal and OB, and then provide that medical staff. And we have about 17,000 users right now across the United States, Puerto Rico. Haven't gotten outside of the continental U.S. outside of that, but yeah, we got a lot of people. And in fact, I think the last statistic I know, Mednax personnel have delivered, at least in the southern start of the states, at least 1 in 3 newborns. So we've got a lot of stuff going on the newborn and neonatal side of things. So can I talk about a little bit about my collaboration team that we have? We have literally the technical and the non-technical side all in one group. So we do all of the different pieces to this. Actually, where did I thought I had my, hang on. I thought I had my other slide going on. There we are. That's the one I want. So let me talk about this and then I'll talk about what we have going on. So we have an Office 365 architect, backend structure, architecture for teams, strategy, technical guidance. That's really that person that's doing those things and helping lay the groundwork for the engineers and BAs to be able to do their jobs. Where the engineers are doing the monitoring and managing, and also any updates that need to go beyond those decision points, which are made by the architect, and of course myself as the Office 365 manager. And then we have our business analysts that are doing all the requirements gathering. So we'll have a request for a SharePoint site or a request for a team site or a process improvement, and we need to get Power Automate or Power Apps involved. Then they'll go out and gather requirements, come out with a solution, document it, and then actually implement it. They're also a big part of our training and user adoption programs that we do. So I work with them directly on that. We actually just literally named a business enablement lead out of our Office BAs. And so they're really focusing on helping the organization really utilize our tools more and more and more. And Teams is kind of really the focus right now on that. So what is our environment? So you kind of know what we had at the beginning of all this stuff. So Office 365 or Microsoft 365, of course, we did a lot of SharePoint. We did a lot of OneDrive at the time. Office groups were huge for us. The group had migrated from a completely different email system a couple years prior to it, called First Class, which is the first time I've ever heard about that application. They So it was a long process. They did a lot of office groups to replace groups that were in that first class application. We did Skype for Business at the time for it was primarily chat, not a lot of peer-to-peer calls or those types of things. GoToMeetings, Polycom, WCS. WCS is just a dedicated conference line where you could actually have a number assigned to you, and then literally you just send an email, hey, join me on this meeting, here's the conference code, and go. No invites, nothing. And then all our conference rooms are Cisco hardware and Polycom backend. So that's kind of our environment and how we did things up until we started doing the project, right? So some of the governance principles that we had to really think about and do in this is we needed to really think about restricting of the Office 365 group creation, because we didn't necessarily have the employee base, their knowledge was very low as far as what's happening with this. And so to be able to get them up to that level where we can then trust them to be able to go and create their own office groups, we're still not even there. And we're, now 2 years into this process of using Teams at this point in office groups, it would be 5 years now. So we didn't want to do that, right? So we didn't want to have that free for all as the other option that we had, and we just didn't want to go down that route. So we had to make sure that we had things in place. So some of the things that we came up with, naming conventions, we looked at the, having the automated capabilities, but at that point we didn't have the licenses associated to be able to do that. So it was a manual effort on our part. So coming up with an actual name convention, and then this has actually been a process for us, not only in Microsoft Teams and in office groups, but across everything. Our distribution groups, our shared mailboxes, all of that. And we literally had to sit down and document all of those things and make sure we're all on the same page, so that when we're going through these processes, that we're creating the things necessary and doing it the right way all the time. So we adopted these types of pieces to be able to help that out. Things like email addresses, where this is how the company has done everything before. Everything prior to us really taking over, they used underscores in display names, they used underscores in the email address, in everything. And that was kind of to go back to that first class applications, that they just carried that through. So we started a process of moving away from those types of naming conventions and making it easier for people to be able to see it and from a display name, and then be able to understand, what is this related to? Is it my department? Is it my team? Is it a process? What is that? And we had to define those things. We actually started recently, because we do have, I want to say we have probably 2,200 office groups out there of variety types, not just associated to Teams, but other pieces, that we know that at least a third of those are not actively being used. So, being able to go through, and we just went through a process of understanding the expiration policy feature that is inside Office 365 and Azure AD. And basically, it allows us to be able to send this out automated wise to all the owners and say, hey, are you still using this? Added caveat is that there's actually an activity piece that's associated to this. So if I am actively using a SharePoint site and I'm adding content, or if I'm in Teams and I'm adding things into a channel or a conversation for that particular team, or I happen to be in the office group itself, right, and following it or doing activity inside that'll automatically renew it, and the owner will not see that particular renewal email. Otherwise, if they haven't been doing things over a certain amount of time, then they're going to get an email. And in fact, they're going to get a couple emails. They're going to get one, depending upon what your time frame is. In this case, this says 180 days. So, at a certain time, I believe it's like 30 days prior to the end of that, they're going to get an email. Hey, by the way, this is coming up. Here's the date it's coming up. Are you still using this? Are you not? 15 days, and then 1 day prior. And so this automated process will definitely help clean things up. What we'll need to do is, if anybody doesn't have, or these office groups don't have owners, then we're going to have to go deal with those and then find somebody who can be the owner, or we're going to let it go. And that let it go means it's a soft delete. If you're not familiar with soft deletes, it's 30 days, and then it's going to do a hard delete, and you can't get that back. So we'll continue working with this process and getting more groups so they're expiring and get rid of some of these sites that we don't need. But it's a learning process on that one. The other thing too is we require, and this is our governance that's saying this, every group that we basically have, and I use the term group loosely, distribution groups and shared mailboxes to a certain extent, and office groups and SharePoint sites and even teams, since they're all related, we require 2 owners. And we want them to not be the manager type owner. We want them to be somebody who's actually going to do something in there. And so that's a requirement anytime we come in with a renew request for somebody, and give us that information, give us why are you using this, and then we'll train you, make sure you get in the right place. But part of that is that we even go so far as to say, hey, in Microsoft Teams, and again, remember our user base, they're not that really savvy when it comes to some of this stuff. We set our settings for our members' permissions so that the owners really can, allow members to create or not create and update channels, right? So that's really the owner's responsibility to do that. And we train them to be able to do those things, and members to delete channels or add and remove apps, right? Those types of things. So give them, the owners, those abilities to be able to do that, so that they can, if they have an initiative, they can reach out to us and say, hey, yeah, you have this ability to go in here and add this particular app. Here it is. And then they take ownership for that within their team area. And of course, if there's any issues with their sites, then we know who to go to. We can take a look at the owners. We can get that information. And if they reach out, somebody reaches out and they need access to that, so we'll say, hey, go to the owner. They'll be able to add you in, which is the nice piece. Of course, expiration policies, that's who's going to get it. And then they can, certify this, renew it or not. So we do a lot of this ahead of time just to make sure. And in fact, our templates are set up from a team side of things to make sure that the owners have those rights and not all the members. Team policies, and we do have some internal governance that we've, over the 1.5 years that we did Microsoft Teams, we've had to implement. One of those was the fact that the organization wanted to be able to allow people out external, right, guest access, so that they can, join the meetings, they can access the chat, they can do those things, because we are involved with a lot of third-party consulting companies, right? So we want to make sure that they have the access to be able to do things and interact with us at any given moment, right? So we literally do set up this access so that they can come in and work with us. So our settings are allowing for guest access to be able to do chats and do those things. The other thing, we did have a policy that came through that our legal team decided, because of some of the things that were happening with our organization has gone through some major change recently, that they didn't want to have the possibility that somebody could record a meeting that some of these conversations were happening. So blanket, they decided, hey, let's turn everything off. And then we're able to then backtrack and say, hey, some people have the ability to be able to record Teams meetings because of process improvement, knowledge transfer, or even training opportunities that are out there that they are doing, and they need to be able to, use that for later on. So we were able to use Teams policies to be able to customize policies so that those individuals would be able to do Teams meetings, and we can kind of track that and see what's going on there. We even, going through and literally turned on in a meeting the ability for, anybody comes into the meeting, doesn't matter if they're from our organization or outside, it will start the meeting up right away. We don't use the lobby, right? So again, these are things that at the beginning, even before we moved to Teams, this is what the expectation was, and it made sense for us to continue on that, because that was the people were doing. Plus, they didn't like that bing every single time somebody popped into a meeting. And so those types of settings, we duplicated those and made those available within it using the Teams policies. The other thing too, we did from an app policy. I got to mention this one because we do have a subset of our organization that uses the Shifts app. And if you're not familiar with the Shift app, it's its predecessor was Staff Hub, in which basically it's a scheduling app. And they moved all of that into Teams as an app in there. And it allows us to be able to, have a group of people, having a scheduler, being able to schedule for their particular area. This is specifically for a group called the hearing screeners, and they are in different hospitals, different areas, but they have to be scheduled across those hospitals. And so we have a app, specifically a pinned app in the Teams apps area, and a custom policy for them. And we apply it to a security group so that they all have access to that particular set of apps. So they see it on the left-hand side. They'll see it if they're on their mobile device. They'll see it on the bottom, and they don't have to go searching for it. So it makes it easy for them to be able to get to that. Other guiding principles. Because of what we were coming from a meeting perspective, we had the entire organization was really very on that idea of I have to be able to dial into a meeting. I don't care what you say. I need to be able to dial into a meeting whenever. And so we had to start investing in the audio conference licensing to be able to do that. Not everybody's going to get one, though, but those who are actually setting up meetings, they can put in the request and we can get them that audio conference license so they can add that dial-in and conference number to their Teams meetings. I will tell you, though, over the last year and a half, though, we still give those licenses out, but I know for a fact that not as many people are needing to use that dial-in number anymore because we have a higher proliferation of the mobile app that is out there now. And that's in our branding, that's in our documentation. Anytime we're talking about meetings, use that app, download that app, get into the app. That way you can be able to have the best experience when you're going into meetings and interacting with people. As I mentioned about the Microsoft Teams recording restrictions, and then vetting process for Microsoft Teams apps, we actually have a process where if somebody needs one, for example, we had a group that really needed to be able to use Adobe Sign with Microsoft Teams. So we actually set up a POC with them, got them set up, and proved that by doing and using Adobe Sign within Microsoft Teams, they were able to cut in half the amount of time it took them to be able to get a document out to a provider, have them sign it, and get it back to them. And in fact, I think they said when they were using Teams and that it was within 30 minutes or so, as opposed to if they had to email it out, it usually took 2 to 3 days, right? So Brian says, do you worry about app reviews? I mean, you take a looking at the app and seeing exactly if it's good or bad. Yeah, I take a look at those, but I know a lot of times, based off of my experience is if it does fit a need and we don't see many security holes, with those types of things, and the end user really finds that it's, beneficial, a lot of times they'll go with it, even if the reviews are not so good. But especially that one, the Adobe Sign one, I think I did actually look at the reviews on that one. That wasn't too bad. I felt pretty good about going down that route. But we were looking at not just that one, we were looking at, there was another PDF one I just couldn't remember. Oh, DocuSign, I think was the other one we were taking a look at as well. And they decided to move to Adobe Sign because of course we already had licenses and had an enterprise agreement with them. So we win some and we lose some. So planning for user adoption. And this is something that my team, we did a lot of work on because I think that's outside of the technical side. I think that's where organizations who don't put a lot of to user adoption, they find that things just don't work well with that particular product. And I think most of you guys know from an Office 365 and all the productivity tools we have, there's some pieces that are just not intuitive. You have to give them, a little nudge and a little training to be able to help them out with that. And then they find that sweet spot where it's going to work for them. And I think that's important to do. The other thing too, is you got to remember Teams is many tools in one. Users will not remember everything the first time. So repetition is going to be important. For us, our approach, we did things in layers. And so we did multiple layers throughout the course of our projects to be able to get Microsoft Teams out there. And so we would do different things. So based off of the roles that were out there, we did actually have sessions specifically for executive admins. So one of my team who used to actually be an executive admin for our company, ended up being a BA in my group. She ran with that. She was like, yeah, I'll take that and I'll show them how to be able to use this. And actually went to their team meeting and showed them exactly how to be able to use Microsoft Teams. And it was very beneficial because we got them in our back pocket and help us out with a lot of things. Trainers, I mean, we had multiple sessions with trainers, especially that first couple of months that we were getting things out, because they wanted it, number one, because they didn't want to use those tools anymore and they wanted to be able to adopt our tools. But they found it a lot easier after they started using it to be able to do their training sessions. And we're constantly, letting them know of new features, things that they can take advantage of in the future. Buzz events, and this is something that we actually picked up. Microsoft actually coined the phrase the buzz event. And basically, this is generating that buzz about the product. And so we did like a kind of a little mini conference type thing where we had tables sitting out in the cafeteria at our headquarters. And we had a couple of different rooms where we had sessions going on and people can walk in. We actually, but this is Mednax is down in Sunrise, Florida, which is just outside of Fort Lauderdale. And one of the locations there, we had the Microsoft store stop in and had some of their paraphernalia there, their laptops and Surfaces and those sitting there, as well as they talked about Teams, right? So they're actually versed in training. But then outside of that, we just had these sessions running throughout the course of the day. We had sessions in the morning, we had the sessions in the afternoon. We even took advantage, and I'll talk a little bit about this a little bit. Microsoft, we actually had a couple people from Microsoft be there and help us out with these sessions and really help generate this excitement around Teams. And this is literally the first big push that we did. We created a resource center that we call Ozone. And Ozone, we literally have, and we built this based off of our needs, but we use a communication site to be able to put information in there. We have resource pages for Teams. We have resource pages for live events. We have resource pages for shifts. And then anytime we have somebody asking a question, we will, or if a ticket comes in, we'll send them the link to that particular page so they can use it, and we'll break it down by role. So for instance, if you're a Microsoft team person and you're using it, are you a member? Are you an owner? Right? So we would talk about those particular things. If you're using Shift app, are you the coordinator or are you somebody that's just going in and getting your shift, right? So that kind of thing, we have that broken down. We targeted early adoptions and get them involved, or adopters, I should say. And we had some key people that we brought in and had, really got them focused on helping this out and helping it in their particular areas. And they did a really good job with that. Now, that was about a year and a half ago. We still do training. We're still doing one-on-one training. And in fact, we've engaged with Microsoft Store to do these monthly one-on-one trainings, because we're at a point right now that we do have, new hires need to get involved, right? They need to understand this tool. They need to understand what's going on with it, because now we've had a proliferation across the organization. They're going to go into a team and their team's using Teams, right? So their department is using Teams. They need to understand it if they've never done it before. So we have these sessions to help them out. We'll also be, introducing OneDrive sessions. We'll also be introducing Teams meeting sessions, specifically just for meetings and how to be able to manage them. So we're adding more and more to our catalog when it comes to these types of sessions. We even do an open door session once every 2 weeks, where we'll just open door. People come into a Teams meeting, ask questions. If nobody's asking questions, then we'll do a show and tell, some of the things that we really, really like about the products and things that we've learned that we really think people should know. So for us, this is a way of life. I mean, our team does a lot of the user adoption, user training, and excited about getting the word out about these products and helping people with it. So another thing we kind of talked about just a little bit, the whole consolidation of our meeting platforms, right? Talking about how are the users using these platforms, because we found that different people were using the platforms different ways. And so we had to consolidate that information and really focus on the different pieces that they were using. And that way it allowed us to be able to then focus our training. So for instance, I used this example in my last time because it was really, really relevant to what really happened. If somebody was using the WC conferencing system, that is a persistent phone number and conference ID. We don't have that capability in Microsoft Teams. And so we had to come up with an alternative and teach the executive admins, hey, by the way, instead of what you were doing, go to 6 months out, put an invite out there and go there, right? And set that up and use that instead. Or this is the way you really should be doing it. Make an invite, send it out. Even if it has to happen in 15 minutes, set that invite out and go. You're ready to go, and it's pretty quickly to be able to do it. As I mentioned before, we have a lot more people using the Teams app now, so it's a lot easier for them to just pop on if they get that invite. And things seems to be going well. Additional licenses, we talked about the audio conferences piece. It was a phased approach over a year, especially with this consolidation. And in fact, we didn't start it right away. We wanted to get Teams first out there, and we did a grassroots type of effort when it came to Teams. We didn't start necessarily, we actually didn't have executive buy-in on any of this, which I thought was interesting. And I've not had many opportunities to do it without executive buy-in, which was great for me in that experience. But we were able to do it through focusing on IT first and pushing it out that way. And then as we got more and more of the IT involved with it, we got more, adoption on it. Then we were able to bring in some of our other groups. Our revenue management group really was big on that. They really liked the tools. They liked the fact that they can collaborate very quickly. And that we were able to get through that RCM group very quickly and then get their adoption. And right now they're our #1 user of Microsoft Teams. So that kind of approach really got us to a point where now it's now proliferated through most of the organizations, and we just have to focus on clinical, which is our last big group now that we have to do that. And that's just the whole idea of doctors just don't want to change the way they're doing things, and clinicians don't want to change the way they're doing things. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to work now towards getting that buy-in on that end as well. But we really, really found that this kind of approach really helped. As we started consolidating our platforms, though, that's where we really found that adoption really happening. So people were stopping going to go to meetings, and especially since we say, hey, in 30 days, we're not going to even have those licenses anymore. We saw that quick turnaround of people really interested in the products and really wanting to know them more so that they can then, be productive in those meetings. And then the last one we just literally got rid of, I think it was 3 weeks ago, was the WCS conferencing platform. So now we don't have that as a tool anymore, which is great. That one was pretty expensive. So we really did the grassroots. If you want to think of it as from a method how we approached it, we did a grassroots, and there was no other way that we could do that. Finding those champions, getting those people involved with it, helping with additional training options is the best way to be able to handle that. And like I said, we worked with Microsoft. So we have a really, really good Microsoft team. In fact, at that point, we actually had our TAM was able to come down with the CSM that we had, the Customer Success Manager, was able to come down to Sunrise to actually participate in one of our buzz events. In fact, we had many conversations with them as far as how to structure them, and we actually partnered up with them to be able to do this, and very successful. And of course, they brought the swag, right? So the ability to be able to give things away and generate some buzz wrapped around that. So I was really happy with that. We eventually even went virtual with the buzz events, and again, we had Microsoft involved with that, and we're able to get to reach out to a much larger group of people, obviously using Teams. And at that point, Teams was not as widely used across the company, but we were able to get some adoption for just them showing up for these meetings. And now, as I mentioned, we do these open door sessions. Open door sessions are all virtual since nobody's in-house anymore. So we do get 15, 20 people usually in those scenarios. So So Kayla, have you needed more resources in your group to apply this adoption, or is your layered approach enough? We are considering a CSM for teams to help us with this. So yeah, it's interesting, Kayla. I go through an approach of that's part of their job on the BA side, is not just doing the BA work, but also doing these things. Now, I have actually appointed somebody real recently, because we did bring in for a time, we brought in a consultant who ended up being kind of our, we call our business enablement guru, if you want to call it that. That helped tremendously. That she really helped. Even though I've done this for a while, I'm really focusing on being a manager and doing that. I need somebody to run it and train my BAs on really how to do that. She did such a good job that now one of my BAs is taking over for her as she's going off contract with us, or has gone off contract with us. But as a group, we've been able to incorporate that into our day because we know it's important. It's one of those things, right? So are we able to then, if we make it important, then we're going to find that we're going to have less tickets because people are going to be more knowledgeable and we don't have to worry about those tickets, right? Or we're going to be able to hand off that building that power app because somebody now knows how to do it. So there's those trade-offs. You're going to have a time when it's going to take a little bit more time, right? But yeah, totally. It is definitely worth the investment. I would agree with that. So great question. Thanks, Kayla. All right, so we have the technical planning that we ended up having to do because our company was a Cisco and Polycom or Poly application side of things. So one of the things that we had to go look at, because we didn't want to get rid of that Cisco hardware, is Polycom. At the time, it was called Poly. They literally came up with this thing called Real Connect, and the Real Connect is a video op with any endpoints that are out there. And in fact, Cisco was one of the primary ones that they had, but because we had Poly already out there, we had that relationship. We were able to go down this route. So we were able to use our existing hardware to be able to then connect into a Teams meeting. And they're basically that cloud that they have, this Real Connect cloud, does that interop piece. And so it says, hey, I got somebody that's on Microsoft Teams. I have somebody that's in Polycom, right? And I want to be able to marry them together. And we could do that. So we literally had meetings where we had the Cisco desktops, our conferencing platform with Polycom on that. And I was in a Teams meeting and we were able to share desktops and be able to go down that route. Eventually, they were add WebEx onto that as well. So that if you were into a WebEx meeting, you invited that, we were able to then have that kind of interrupt as well. So it's a really, really cool, powerful tool, especially if you have to go into an interim between, this is what my old system is, and if we're going to eventually move, but we want to use our hardware because we paid a lot of money for that hardware, that would be a good interim. We did go, and I will tell you this was awesome when we did this. We went full Microsoft Teams rooms. After we got done with that hardware, we're like, nope, we've been playing around with this. We really want to go all in. To be perfectly honest, we were talking to our Microsoft team, and they said, hey, we got this program that we can give you 5 rooms for free. We're a large enough organization that they could do 5 rooms. Replace them, actually bring in a consulting company. This is part of the fast track program that does this. And come in here and we'll replace them and get you up and running. And we loved it. We really liked it a lot. And we ended up continuing on with that because I think we had anywhere between 10 and 12 rooms in our headquarters. And we have a lot of conference rooms in some of the practices that we have. And we're slowly moving them all over to Microsoft Teams rooms. But we did work with a consulting company to be able to help out with the installation. They did a great job with that and made sure everything was in there. They did their boardrooms. We actually had 2 different boardrooms that we needed to do, but there are different types of Teams rooms for your different types of scenarios that you have, right? So you have small rooms, they call huddle rooms or focus rooms or mid-size or even large rooms. That you can then get these particular products for that. And the nice thing about it is you have one-touch start for your meetings. You particular a Windows device that has so you literally can say, hey, I got a room, let's have a conversation, this room's open. I can literally take the room over and be able to actually have that meeting just sitting down and connecting through that without having a Teams invite set up on that room. But invites will work directly with that. So it worked out really well for what we're trying to do. And then of course, COVID came and we're putting some of that stuff on hold until we actually go back to the office. But that was a really fun time to be able to understand that process and work with that consulting company and really understand what's going on. There we have licensing to support all the project pieces. To let you know, our environment is we have a mix. So a lot of our corporate, a lot of those who actually have Mednax laptops and desktops, they get the E3, which is the desktop apps license. Everybody else who is clinical, they don't necessarily, they may be roaming around a lot, so they don't necessarily need that desktop application. They have the F3, which is the web-only licenses for most of the Office 365 or Microsoft 365 apps. And so with that, dichotomy is we have to kind of talk through, okay, so, what do you have for a license, making sure that Teams was enabled, because it wasn't by default, and we want to make sure that they had access to that. As we started, and just so you know, we also had Skype for Business going in our environment. And as we started to move away from Skype for Business and finally we're able to get to 0 and the use of Skype for Business, we had to remove that license or that part of the license off as well. For the Teams side of things, for Teams rooms, I should say, there's a meeting room SKU that we did purchase, and you need to have that if you're going to set up that meeting room as a resource room. It needs that so that then it can connect into those backend pieces. We also added the direct routing, so it actually can call out from that room, so that it can go in and say, hey, I need to go to, maybe it's a WebEx meetings, and they didn't forward that meeting invite to the team room, which it should be able to work with WebEx. But they can dial at that number and put in a conference code, and they can do it from that room. So that way it was easier for them. And then we also did the audio conference licensing for that dial out capability for meetings. Other hardware considerations, we actually work with our desktop services group to come up with certified headsets that they could use and put them in our catalog so that they can go out there. We found best if we could find things that had noise canceling or prevent that echo or squeal that's happening. But the biggest thing is we found out is people will always go cheap, right? And they will say, oh, I'm just going to use the laptop speakers and microphone. And that's where that echo comes in all the time. So that's one of the things that we stress anytime we're teaching and training is, understand you may have to use the speaker and the laptop speaker and microphone, but if you can use, even use your Apple headset that you get, or something that will work and connect to it, or use these headsets that we provide that you can purchase for your department. Network prep, because we did have Skype for Business in place, we did mostly it was chat, but we did actually have some peer-to-peer calling through that. So we had already QoS set up for utilizing group policy for our devices. And we also had, for the most part, we had done a good job with our firewalls. But the things that we didn't do with the Skype for Business side of things is we didn't identify in our subnets. And so when you use the call quality dashboard, and we'll talk about that in a second, it's hard to identify where the issues are when you're inside our networks if you don't have those subnets defined in there. Because then you're able to then troubleshoot and say, hey, I'm seeing that this is issues here. They can actually go to that. Oh, yeah, you know what? That firewall wasn't configured correctly. The other thing that we learned throughout this process is that you want to make sure that your preferred wireless network, if you do have, most organizations now do have the 2.5 or the 5 gigahertz, always go to the 5 gigahertz. That's going to be a much better quality, especially for Teams meetings on your laptops. That seemed to work out pretty well as soon as we did that. Well, with all that, and on top of that, we had to talk about split tunneling for VPN. We had to make sure that was in place. Luckily, most of that was already in place. The latest one was optimization for Citrix or other VDI scenarios. So we now have a big push to be able to have teams in Citrix platform. And Microsoft and Citrix finally was able to work together to be able to come and get that to work, especially in a non-persistent VDI. And if you are interested, or if you are in a scenario where you are utilizing Citrix or other VDI tools, and you're having problems specifically, especially in our situation, we wanted it so that it was non-persistent. If you're not familiar with the non-persistent, that is, I'm going to get the exact same look and feel every single time I go in there. It's going to wipe everything out. It may give me a new instance of that desktop, different server, but it's going to look exactly the same, but nothing's going to get stored on there. Well, the problem with that is things like credentials. Office does certain things with credentialing that it has to store it on a specific location inside, where in a non-persistent VDI, it doesn't, right? So we actually had to go out, and we talked to Microsoft a couple times on this. And finally, we enabled this thing called FS Logics, which actually allows from a VDI to be able to have think of it as like an external hard drive associated to that particular user. And no matter when or what instance of that Citrix desktop that they go into, they'll always get that hard drive, and then that profile information will follow them. That we actually were struggling with it for a long time, and Microsoft came back and said, yeah, you can do this in non-persistent. Our Citrix guy wasn't convinced that FS Logic was the right thing. Eventually, he figured it out. This is the way to go, and we're able to get that to work. But it was a process, right? So now we're actually, we have Teams, meetings can be done in Citrix, all those things, and it's not killing the performance of that Citrix VDI. So it was a little bit of a run to be able to get to that. Deploy Microsoft Teams app desktop. So Tommy, we had issues with Citrix HDX optimization, not choosing the correct NIC. When also connected to VPN, all the other cases, it works. We haven't. I don't think we're actually utilizing the HDX optimization piece. To be perfectly honest, Tommy, I'm not the Citrix guy. I just work with the team a lot, so I don't know specifically how they're doing that. When connected with VPN. Yeah, I'm not 100% positive on that, so I apologize on that, Tommy. So deploying the app itself, we worked with our desktop services team to be able to do it. And for what we first started doing, we actually decided not to deploy the Microsoft Teams app. And part of the reason why we decided to do that is we wanted for quick adoption. And we didn't necessarily think that Avani was going to be able to, that's our deployment tool that we have, be able to handle that right away. And plus there were changes happening with the actual app to get deployed that we just wanted to wait. So we literally said, hey guys, go out to teams.microsoft.com/download, download the app. You don't have to be an admin to install it, which was a blessing in disguise on that one. And then they were able to get up and running right away. Well, later on, Microsoft included this in Office 365 Pro Plus version 1903, where the Teams app was finally part of the install package. So that could get pushed out then as one, as they were pushing out Office 365 and getting rid of our Office 2010 and Office 2013 installations. We were able to get them updated so that they have the latest and greatest. And now a lot of those updates are coming through our Avanti app that we use for deployment, except for Teams. Teams updates by itself, and we are constantly getting those updates throughout the course of the month. Other things we had to consider deploying in Office 365 mobile apps. I should also say it's just not the mobile apps, but now we're adding MFA to all of it. So it's not just the app, but it's also the MFA process, and getting the Authenticator app as part of that as well. Doing that through Intune. We don't have an SCCM infrastructure, but it does seem like Microsoft is really pushing towards the Intune way of doing things anyways. So we actually have a team that's working on that. And then, one of the things that we decided early on is that we didn't want people to be able to, copy content that was Mednax content on their personal device. or their personal side of their computer or their mobile device. You have to understand that we don't supply anybody with a mobile device in the company. So everything is BYOD. And we have a lot of people that at the beginning refuse to, oh, I don't want to download the Teams app because that means I have to, now you're going to be able to control my mobile app or my mobile device. And we had to, educate them. No, we're not. We're just controlling the Mednax content. And, we're going to be able to do that fairly easily without having to do anything on your particular mobile device. Obviously, we had some considerations because, some states you have to, if you have a company app or any company apps that they have to do it on their device, you have to provide them with a device to do that. I believe California requires that, if I'm not mistaken. So we have those things we still have to work through, but for the most part, we've had a lot of an increase in app usage across the board, especially in Teams. We did have to move from Skype for Business, and there was, a lot of gnashing of teeth on the right way to be able to do this. And I'm not sure how many of you guys have Skype for Business or have moved. There's so many different pathways when it comes to this. And the one that we ended up working for us is as we were progressing from our grassroots, we decided that we were going to start in islands mode. And if you're not familiar with islands mode, basically Skype for Business stays on Skype for Business and Teams stays on their side, or I should say they can use both of them. But if you want to talk to somebody that's on Skype, you have to be in Skype to do that. If you want to talk to somebody in Teams, you have to be in Teams to do that, right? So that's something that we started with, and then as our adoption grew, right, then we started going through and said, hey, let's do Skype, and then let's do Teams collaboration and meetings, right? So those people who were utilizing still the chat for Skype, and they had all those things set up, but let's flip over and actually do the collaboration. So have the channels in place, and let's have the meetings in place. Let's go from there. And then finally, we finished off as we got further and further down the road. We had higher adoption, and Skype for Business basically went out the door. We were able to go to Teams mode. But it's going to be dependent upon your company, and you may have a scenario where and we did actually have that for a while. We had, I'm trying to remember, I think it was one of our sales groups that was actually had connections externally. So we had to literally that group had to be on their own. Everybody else around them was using Teams, but that for on their own for a while, and we're able to catch them up as we had more adoption. But you have to kind of plan that out as far as how your company is going to do that and what groups need to do that if you're using Skype for Business. Use a lot of policies and organizational settings. I do custom policies all the time for testing. That's one of the things I like is if a new feature comes out, I will go and create a policy. I will assign it to my group just so that we have the ability to test it ahead of time, document what it's going to be, and then come up with a game plan if we need to train or get out a news article about that feature to let people know. And we do everything from our Ozone site as far as that kind of content. It just makes it a lot easier to be able to access and do things there. We set the app policies depending upon the group, as I mentioned about the Shifts app and the hearing screeners. We also do external, domain federation. We do have federation with, Microsoft and some of those particular companies that we are continually doing work with. So that they have the ability to be able to, I can just literally put in my TAM's email address in a chat, and I'm have the ability to chat with her directly because they have a federation with us as well. So that's been very, very helpful. Be able to have those conversations without having to spin up another email or give them a call. With this whole project, we used our collaboration tools. And unfortunately for us, this was prior to a tool coming out called the Team Advisor tool. So before that, we literally spun up our own enterprise collaboration. That's my team, Teams area. We used Planner. We used OneNote extensively for doing things. And so we would plan out using these tools as far as and tracking what our activities were as we were doing it, having meetings, those types of things, and having a one-stop shop for our information as we're moving forward. as I mentioned, Microsoft later on in our project came out with this thing called the Team Advisor tool. And guess what it ends up doing? It ends up creating teams and planners that are already pre-populated with a lot of those activities that you need to check off anyways. And you have a couple options. Oh, let me go back here. It depends upon what your workloads are. Chat, Teams, channels, or you're doing meetings and conferencing. There's 2 different teams specifically for that. And you'll notice in the screenshot here that it actually gives me a, well, how many of the assessments or assignments that have been completed, right? So we can actually see, oh yeah, in this case, 3 out of 8, and then 3 out of 7 for the other one. If I need to go and view that, I can click on the link and I can view the teams, the planner, and all those things for that. But that's something that you can do as a Teams admin or global admin. You go into the Teams area, you go down to that area, click on it, deploy it. Teams are out there, and it'll start tracking your progress from there. Managing and maintaining. So we use the advanced call quality dashboard. This thing is great because I know at the time we were actually in the transition between the Skype for Business call quality dashboard and then what ended up being the Teams call quality dashboard. We ended up actually working with a Microsoft group, a fast track group, to be able to help alleviate some issues that we were having in some segments of our networking. And they use this heavily as far as to take a look at the segments that we have, getting the segments in, making sure we have those defined, and then seeing where are our call quality issues that we have. And it's really nice because it has a number of different reports that are in there, and it's up to date and really gives us some good information as far as what's going on. Now, obviously, with us not being in the office anymore, a lot of this stuff is going to be, dependent upon the home networks. And that's one of the things that, this really much better solution, especially for, when you're in the office, because we have all that data, but we can't control anything when it comes to home networks, right? So we haven't been using this as much lately, but it's very, very good tool. The other, just in general, you have the Teams Admin Console, individual user issues or failure is right there. Like if Bob calls up and has an issue, I can go in and say, hey, Bob, when did you have that issue? Can I go take a look at that meeting? I look at that meeting and see Bob and Mary were talking, and about halfway through, it just dropped, right? So I can see what the potential of what side had dropped. Was it Mary's? Was it Bob's? And I can see what's going on and help investigate what's happening there. And then we also train some of our service desk people to be able to do some of that stuff. Look at those calls and be able to help them out at that point. 9 times out of 10, it's somebody happens to be on the road or in a bad spot, and they're not necessarily in the office, and they lost connection, right? So it's a great tool to be able to find that, and that's just right in the admin console, looking at the user and looking at their call history, right? As an example, you have here, in fact, this was my manager at one time. And you notice that he had a call problem that was poor. I go into that meeting and I see, looks like a poor quality network caused by the network, right? So we can see specifically and get more details on that, get the log files if we need to, and go from there. Speaking of log files, we got very good as far as, debugging and taking a look at that. We do have log files that are actually on Macs and PCs that we can actually pull, but you do have to enable them to be able to get that log file information. Once that's done, then we can actually see what's going on. So if you have consistency with somebody's having problems, then you enable that log stream, and then you're able to go in and then debug it. 9 times out of 10, if you open up a ticket with Microsoft, they're going to ask for those types of things. So it's always good to pre-do that stuff ahead of time. Network issues. We actually had network issues, as I was kind of mentioning before. So Microsoft has this program called the Microsoft Healthy Meeting Program. And what they will do is the team will come in and they'll do a stem to stern look at, what's going on with our environment. We thought we had been doing pretty well, but there was some tweaking that we ended up having to do. As I was mentioning, we found out we didn't have the segments in Microsoft Teams. And so we had to literally put the segments in there so they can analyze where are the actual issues. And we did find some firewalls that were not configured correctly. And we did see some devices that didn't have QoS set up correctly. So we had to go back and do those remediation steps, but they were able to look at that and come back with it. In fact, they used the advanced call quality dashboard a lot to be able to really see what's going on, and if there was any issues, to be able to pinpoint what's going on. This is great. Talk to your Microsoft team if you are having those types of issues. It's a 3 to 4 week engagement. We actually had a dedicated 1 to 2 people with a project manager that was involved with our team to be able to help with this. And Microsoft loves to do these types of investments because if you have a good meeting experience, right? If it's conference rooms or if it's just overall, then you're going to want to use the tools more. And long term, it's good for Microsoft for that type of thing. So take advantage of that if you have the opportunity. The other thing that because we, especially for our Microsoft Teams rooms specifically, we went through that fast track program. We were brought into the whole Microsoft Teams Managed Rooms Premier service. If you've not heard about this, this is especially from a Teams room perspective. I think it's very, very valuable. It is if looking at the licenses to this is actually an add-on to your room SKU, your team room SKU that you would buy. But the things that you get with this is just amazing because you have this ability. It's literally monitoring 24/7 your devices, your team room devices. It's seeing if it still has that heartbeat, if things are working correctly. It will literally notify you when things happen. If you are having a problem with something, you need to get support. You have the ability to do a ticket right from this particular area. And it's all cloud-based, right? So you just go into a browser, you log in, and you're able to do it. You actually have the ability to do different roles in there for different people. So not everybody has the ability to do everything. And there's even now an integration with ServiceNow. So if something happens, you integrate it with ServiceNow, it actually will do a ticket in ServiceNow and be able to give us that information if we need to. I like this part is sometimes it will even do some proactive remediation depending upon the scenario. So if it needs to do an update, right, it will actually make sure it pushes that update. Updates are automatic as well, and it will manage those particular pieces. So it's a really great tool. It even says things like it'll tell you what's going on. Hey, this particular part of it, the device was unplugged, and literally, you have somebody go over there, and yes, for some reason, somebody kicked it out and it was unplugged. So plug it back in, everything goes back to normal and to green. And so it's been really, really a good investment for us to be able to have that from a Teams rooms perspective. All right. I feel like I was talking the whole time. Any questions?
No, I don't think anybody wanted to interrupt because you laid it all out. No, it was, the hardware, the infrastructure, those kinds of issues that nobody thinks of at the first when I'm just getting software, aren't I? No, there's more.
Absolutely.
So, no, that was a really good layout and a really good talk through this case study. It was
good. Thank you, John. All right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, everybody. Tim?
Yep. Hey, guys. So I'm going to, based on who participated in the conversation here, I'm going to go ahead and draw a winner of the $25 gift card. And don't forget, actually, before I do that, I am going to drop once again in the chat the survey right here. Make sure you fill this out now that you've attended all the sessions. Get the survey done. That qualifies you for the Surface Pro Go giveaway. And as far as our random picker goes, it's Kayla Bauer. So Kayla, are you still on? I believe you are. As long as you are able to accept gifts, make sure you let me know. Otherwise, we will send that up. Oh, you are in EDU? Are you still $25 over the threshold? All right. So what we'll do is we'll go with Joe Dunn.
Yay! I can accept.
All right, perfect. We'll get that out to you, Joe. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending once again. Make sure you fill out the survey. Very much appreciate. I think for the first virtual admin day, we're all kind of learning. Hopefully, we can get some good feedback and let us know how we did, what the pain points were, what you liked. We really thrive on that stuff. We really want to make these events as good as possible. So thank you very much for everybody attending.
Thanks very much for putting this on.
Yeah. And thank you, Don, very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
2 sessions. They're both great. And we'll have the meeting recordings and slide decks will be collected. Hopefully we'll get them on the website. I can't promise that's going to happen quickly, but as usual, we generally get it done. So that's going to be a big focus next week, is getting everything posted so the content's available, all the links, all that happy stuff.